What if the one you abandoned was the only one who could save you, even after you were gone? In a quiet suburban neighborhood, a family cat named Whiskers is left to fend for herself after being cast out by the very people she loved. But Whiskers is no ordinary pet. Driven by an unbreakable bond and a mysterious intuition, she embarks on a heart-stirring journey that will change everything. When tragedy strikes and secrets of the past unravel, one question remains: can a loyal heart bridge the gap between life and death and bring healing where it's needed most? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. What would you do if a loyal friend returned when you needed them the most? And don't keep this story to yourself. Share it with others who believe in the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that inspire, uplift, and remind us of life's most important connections. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that could change the way you see the world. In a quiet suburb of Seattle, Washington, the Carter family lived in a modest home filled with memories and the sounds of everyday life. Emily Carter, a single mother in her late 30s, worked long hours at a local cafe to support her 10-year-old daughter, Lily. Life wasn't easy, but they had each other, and they had Whiskers. Whiskers, a gray tabby with soft fur and amber eyes, was more than a pet. She had been part of their family ever since Lily rescued her as a kitten on a rainy afternoon. For Lily, Whiskers was a best friend, a confidant who never left her side. Even Emily, though often overwhelmed with life's challenges, found comfort in the cat's quiet presence. But lately, Emily's patience was wearing thin. Bills were piling up, the stress of work was relentless, and every little thing felt like more weight on her shoulders. One chilly afternoon, Emily came home from a particularly grueling shift. Her feet ached, and her mind was cluttered with worries. She found Lily sitting at the kitchen table, carefully drawing a picture with crayons. "Mom, look." Lily held up her drawing with pride. It was a simple but heartwarming sketch of their little family. Herself, Emily, and Whiskers. Emily forced a tired smile. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." For a fleeting moment, peace returned to the house, but the calm didn't last. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the living room. Emily rushed in to find a shattered porcelain vase, the only heirloom left from her late mother, scattered across the floor. In the corner, Whiskers stood frozen, her wide eyes filled with guilt. "Whiskers!" Emily's voice was sharp, laced with frustration. Lily hurried in, her heart sinking at the sight. "Mom, it was an accident. She didn't mean to." But Emily, exhausted and overwhelmed, saw only the mess. "I can't do this anymore," she muttered. "We can't keep her." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, no, she's family." Emily's gaze softened for a moment, but the weight of her struggles pulled her back. "I'm sorry, Lily. We just can't." That evening, despite Lily's desperate pleas, Emily carried Whiskers outside and set her gently on the front porch. The cat rubbed against her legs, purring softly, still trusting. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. Lily stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Mom, don't leave her out there." Emily's heart ached, but she closed the door. For the next few days, Whiskers waited by the door. She curled up on the doormat, her amber eyes fixed on the entrance, expecting it to open any moment. Every creak of the door made her heart leap with hope, only for it to fall when no one let her in. The nights grew colder, and rain soaked her fur. But Whiskers remained. This was her home. Her family was inside, and she believed they would take her back. Inside, Lily cried herself to sleep, missing the warm, comforting presence of her beloved cat. She begged Emily every day, please let her back in. Emily felt the sting of guilt, though she buried it beneath the weight of responsibilities. Life demanded too much from her, and she convinced herself that letting Whiskers go was the right decision. But outside, Whiskers waited, loyal, hopeful, and unaware that her life was about to change forever. The days stretched on, turning into weeks. Whiskers' soft purring and gentle paws no longer graced the Carter family home. The porch where she used to curl up in the sun felt empty, the space she once filled now quiet and still. Whiskers was no longer part of the family's daily life. Life on the streets was a cruel reality for the cat who had once been adored. The familiar warmth of her home was replaced by the cold nights under the open sky, and hunger followed her everywhere. She wandered from alley to alley, sniffing for scraps, searching for anything to fill her empty stomach. Her once sleek, shiny fur had grown matted and dull as she adjusted to this new, unforgiving world. Not far from where Whiskers roamed, Mrs. Thompson, a kind-hearted elderly woman who had watched the cat grow up on the Carters' porch, noticed her one afternoon. Mrs. Thompson lived alone, her only company the stray cats that wandered into her yard. She had always admired Whiskers from afar, and now, seeing her in the streets, she couldn't help but feel a pang of concern. "Poor thing," Mrs. Thompson murmured, setting down a bowl of milk and some leftover food. She hoped the familiar smell might bring comfort to the stray. Whiskers, wary of strangers but still hungry, approached slowly. She lapped up the milk and nibbled at the food, but there was no real joy in the act. Whiskers didn't stay long. Though the food was a welcome relief, something in her heart still longed for the warmth of the home she had been forced to leave behind. She was independent now, forced to fend for herself, but the memories of being loved, of being part of a family, lingered in her mind. Back at the Carter house, Lily hadn't forgotten her beloved cat. Every night, without her mother knowing, Lily would sneak outside and place a small dish of food near the back fence. She was determined to keep a small connection with Whiskers, to help her somehow, even if her mom didn't approve. "Lily, we've talked about this," Emily said one evening, catching her daughter in the act. "We can't keep feeding her. She's gone." "But Mom," Lily protested, her voice breaking with emotion. "She's out there alone, and she's hungry." Emily's expression softened for a moment, but she remained firm. "I know it's hard, but she's better off on her own now. We can't keep going like this." Reluctantly, Lily placed the plate down one last time before returning inside, but she couldn't stop the tears that threatened to fall. She missed Whiskers so much, and the house felt emptier with each passing day. Then, one day, Whiskers simply vanished from the neighborhood. It was Mrs. Thompson who noticed first. The dish of food she had left out for the cat went untouched. She searched around, calling softly for Whiskers, but the cat was nowhere to be found. The streets that once echoed with the sound of her paws were quiet. Lily noticed it soon after. She had become so used to looking out the window and seeing Whiskers by the fence or the porch, and now there was nothing. No whiskered face, no soft meow. The yard felt impossibly still. "She'll come back," Lily whispered to herself, as if saying it out loud would make it true. But deep down, she knew something had changed. Emily noticed it too. She saw how Lily's face seemed to fall every time she glanced out the window, how her daughter carried Whiskers' old toy in her hands, as if holding on to a piece of the past. Emily couldn't ignore the guilt that crept into her heart. She had made the decision to let Whiskers go, but the weight of that choice now felt heavier than ever. She tried to dismiss it, telling herself that she had done what was best. But in the quiet moments, when no one else was looking, the guilt lingered. What no one could have predicted, what no one could have imagined, was that Whiskers' disappearance wasn't just an accident. Whiskers had gone somewhere. Somewhere beyond the streets she had roamed. Somewhere that would change everything. Whiskers' life took a surprising turn when she found her way to Alex Parker, a young man in his late 20s who had recently moved to the quiet town of Cascade Springs. Alex had left behind his fast-paced city life in search of peace and solitude in the suburbs, but what he didn't expect was that his journey would lead him to a stray cat in need of help. It was a cold afternoon when Whiskers first appeared at Alex's doorstep. Her fur was matted and dirty, evidence of her struggle to survive on the streets. She hesitated for a moment, but hunger and exhaustion finally took over. Alex, noticing her weariness, knelt down slowly to greet her. "Hey there, little one," he said softly, his voice a gentle invitation. "You look like you've been through a lot." At first, Whiskers was cautious, her emerald eyes wary of this new human. But as her stomach growled, the scent of food drew her closer. Alex extended a hand with a small bowl of tuna, and after a moment of hesitation, Whiskers accepted. She devoured the food quickly, her hunger overwhelming her fears. It was a small act of kindness, but to Whiskers, it felt like the first real comfort she had experienced in days. Alex was no stranger to animals, but he wasn't sure what to do with a stray cat. Still, something about her quiet presence felt right. He took her inside, offering her a warm spot by the fireplace and a soft bed to rest in. The house felt quieter with her there, but in a peaceful way. Days passed, and Whiskers settled into her new life with Alex. Despite the comfort, something inside her was unsettled. Every evening, as the sky darkened and the world outside turned still, she would sit by the window, gazing longingly into the street below. Her heart ached for the family she had once known. She remembered Lily's soft touch and the laughter of Emily in the kitchen. The warmth of her old home felt like a distant dream, one she couldn't quite reach. Despite the safety of Alex's home, Whiskers often found herself wandering around, her mind drifting back to her former family. Would they ever miss her? Would Emily regret her decision? Whiskers tried not to dwell on these thoughts, but at night they haunted her. She'd curl up in her new bed, but she could never fully relax. Would she ever be able to find peace with the loss of her old family? Back in Seattle, Emily was beginning to feel the weight of her decision. It had been months since Whiskers had disappeared, and though life was moving on in many ways, Emily couldn't shake the unease that had settled within her. Financial struggles still gripped her, but something else, something more personal, was beginning to affect her. Lately, Emily had been feeling drained, her body exhausted in ways she couldn't explain. Small aches had started creeping into her life, and she couldn't seem to shake the constant weariness. But Emily, always a fighter, kept pushing forward. She had a family to take care of after all. There was no time to dwell on how tired she felt. She buried herself in work, thinking that if she kept moving, it would all go away. Still, at night, when the house was quiet and the worries of the day faded, something inside her began to stir. She thought about Whiskers, the cat who had once been part of their family. How had Whiskers been after she was sent outside? Would Emily ever see her again? The questions gnawed at her, but she quickly shoved them aside. It was done. Whiskers was gone, and she couldn't go back. Still, the guilt lingered. In moments of silence, Emily found herself thinking about the cat's eyes, those trusting eyes that she had turned away. Meanwhile, Lily struggled to cope with the absence of Whiskers. She missed the cat more than she was willing to admit, but as she grew older, She tried to push the pain aside. It was hard not to remember the way Whiskers had always been there for her, always by her side, offering quiet comfort during the rough patches. But the emptiness in her heart never quite went away. Every now and then, Lily would catch herself walking past the empty porch, her eyes lingering on the spot where Whiskers had once sat, waiting for the door to open. More than anything, Lily missed the feeling of having Whiskers there. The house seemed too quiet without her. So, Lily did what she could to keep the connection alive. Sometimes she would slip outside and sit by the porch just to remember how it felt when Whiskers was there. And then, there were the dreams. Lily had begun to dream of Whiskers every night. At first, they were faint memories, images of her curled up by the fireplace or sleeping on the windowsill. But as time went on, the dreams became more vivid. Each night, Whiskers appeared, looking just as she had before. Soft fur, bright green eyes. The dreams were always the same, yet always different. It was as though Whiskers was trying to tell her something. One night, Lily dreamed of Whiskers walking down a familiar path, looking back over her shoulder at Lily. She meowed softly, as if to say, "I'm still here. I haven't forgotten you." It felt real, so real that Lily woke up with tears in her eyes. She couldn't shake the feeling that Whiskers was trying to reach out to her, even from afar. As the days wore on, Emily found herself plagued by a strange sense of unease. It started small, just an occasional feeling that something wasn't quite right, but it grew stronger. She began having strange dreams too. In one, Whiskers was sitting at the doorstep, waiting for Emily to open the door. Her eyes were full of longing, and it felt like Whiskers was silently asking, "Why did you let me go?" Emily woke up with a start, her heart pounding. The dream felt so real, like she had truly seen Whiskers, even if only in her mind. The dreams didn't stop. In fact, they began to recur, almost as if Whiskers was trying to tell her something that Emily couldn't quite understand. Every time Emily woke up, the feeling of guilt intensified. Was it possible that Whiskers was still out there? Could she be lost, waiting for Emily to change her mind? But Emily didn't know where to start. The cat was gone, and the house had moved on without her. Yet deep down, Emily couldn't shake the haunting feeling that she had made a terrible mistake. Was there any way to undo the past? The more she thought about it, the more the guilt grew. The dreams, the feeling of loss, the strange connection she couldn't explain. It all pointed to something greater than herself, something she wasn't yet ready to face, but fought as a way of revealing the truth, whether we're prepared for it or not. It was an ordinary Thursday afternoon when everything changed for Emily. She had been feeling a slight tightness in her chest, a breathlessness that she pushed aside. Life had been taking its toll on her. The daily pressures, the financial worries, the guilt of losing Whiskers, it had all been building up. But Emily was determined to keep going, as always. She had worked through her exhaustion, her weariness, and now she felt a little worse. But there wasn't time to rest. There was always something more to do. The silence of the house wrapped around her, but she didn't notice it. She couldn't afford to notice. There was no time for weakness, not when everything seemed to be slipping away. But by the time the afternoon sun began to fade, Emily's heart finally gave way. Alone in the house, her body, weary from years of stress, couldn't keep going. She collapsed on the living room floor, her breath shallow, her chest aching too much for her to keep going. It was a heart attack, a sudden end to a life that had struggled so long. Emily died alone, in the silence of her home, with no one to hear her final breath. No one would notice she was gone for several days. Her absence was felt only in the silence that echoed within the house. The world outside carried on, unaware that Emily Carter had left it. The house, once filled with noise, now stood cold and empty. The phone didn't ring, and the doorbell didn't chime. The rooms, untouched, seemed to hold their breath. The once bustling space now sat as a forgotten monument to a life that was no more. Lily was miles away, staying with relatives, and had no idea what had happened. She missed her mother, but it was the loss of Whiskers that weighed heavily on her heart. Each day, she felt more disconnected from the life she once knew. Every corner of the house she grew up in felt empty, without the cat who had been her faithful companion. Lily had tried to stay strong for her relatives, but the absence of Whiskers had created a deep void in her heart. She spent her nights tossing and turning, haunted by dreams where she could see her mother's face, but never quite reach her, and Whiskers, sitting at the edge of her dreams, would look at her with those unspoken, knowing green eyes. It felt as though something was missing, something that she couldn't name, but it gnawed at her every day. Despite the warmth of her relative's home, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Her heart felt heavy, burdened by the unanswered questions, the incomplete puzzle that she couldn't seem to put together. Every dream, every passing day, brought her back to the same thought. Where was Whiskers? Meanwhile, the house that had once been Emily's stood empty, still and silent. The echoes of life had long since disappeared, leaving only the shadows to linger. Emily's passing, unnoticed for days, went unmarked by the outside world. The rooms were as they had always been, silent, waiting. The absence of Emily, once the heart of the house, left behind an unsettling stillness. Everything seemed to be suspended in time, the house in limbo, its spirit lingering in the quiet corners. Nothing had moved, no one had noticed. But Whiskers, miles away from the empty house, was the first to sense that something was wrong. She had settled into her new life with Alex Parker, a young man who had found her wandering the streets and took her in. She had found comfort in the warmth of his home, the soft bed, and the steady routine. But there was something inside of her that refused to rest. Whiskers felt the shift in the air, a strange, unexplainable pull deep in her chest. It was like an invisible force was calling her, beckoning her home. At first, Whiskers tried to dismiss the unease. She had a new home, new comforts, and she had adjusted. But that pull grew stronger, and she began to feel restless, as if something important was calling her. It was a quiet evening when it happened. Whiskers was gazing out of the window, the setting sun casting golden rays over the distant horizon. But suddenly something inside her stirred. A sharp wave of panic rushed through her body, and her ears perked up. She looked at the door, then back out the window, her eyes scanning the neighborhood as though searching for something or someone. The feeling intensified. Whiskers could feel it in her paws, her bones, in the pit of her stomach. Something was wrong, something had changed, and it pulled at her heart like an invisible thread. With a sudden decision, Whiskers leapt off the windowsill, stretched her limbs, and padded toward the door. There was no mistaking it now. She had to go. She had to find out what had happened. There was no time to wait. Whiskers was determined to return to her old home. She knew it wouldn't be easy. She had been far from the house for months, and the journey back would take her through unfamiliar paths. But her instincts were clear. She needed to go home. And so, Whiskers began her journey, driven by an unseen force, propelled by love, loyalty, and the strange connection she had always shared with her old family. Each step took her further from her new life, but closer to the truth. What awaited her at the end of this journey, she could not know. But something told her that she had no choice. The road ahead was uncertain, but Whiskers would not be stopped. Whiskers moved steadily through the bustling streets, her paws barely making a sound on the pavement as cars sped by and pedestrians rushed past. She didn't mind the busy city, though it wasn't easy to navigate through the crowd. Her green eyes, sharp and focused, scanned her surroundings, each step bringing her closer to the place she could almost feel in her heart. A home she once knew so well. Despite the chaos, there was an undeniable pull guiding her, leading her through each busy intersection and around every corner. The longer she walked, the more familiar the streets began to feel. She knew this town. She had lived here for years, roaming the familiar sidewalks and alleyways. Her fur had become matted from the days of travel, and her body ached. But she pushed on. There was no other choice. She had to return. She was sure of it. She felt it deep inside. Through quiet forests and along hidden trails, Whiskers pressed on, her little paws moving faster, her body more determined with every step. Even when the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange, she kept going. She knew she was close now. With each passing minute, the scent of her old home grew stronger. The house was just ahead. When Whiskers finally reached the familiar street, a sense of calm washed over her. She could see the house now, the one she had once called home. It stood silent, bathed in the soft glow of the evening light, like a memory waiting to be unlocked. She stopped in front of the door, her body tired from the long journey, but her eyes filled with purpose. This was where she needed to be. She sat down and stared at the door, waiting for something, though she didn't quite know what. In the meantime, Detective Sarah Mills had been called to the house after neighbors reported a strange, lingering smell. It had been several days since anyone had seen Emily, and the quiet had become unsettling. The detective arrived, walking up the steps to the front door, her steps deliberate and measured. Something about this house felt off, as though it held a secret that no one had uncovered. As she approached the door, she froze. There, sitting in front of the house, was Whiskers. The sight took her by surprise. She had heard about the missing cat, but seeing her sitting so calmly, almost as if she were waiting, made something inside the detective stir. Whiskers didn't move as Sarah knelt down to her level, her green eyes locking onto the detective's with a quiet intensity. "Whiskers?" The detective's voice was soft, as if the cat might understand her. Whiskers let out a low meow, but she didn't get up. She remained still, her gaze unblinking. It was as if she was guarding the house, keeping watch over something inside. The neighbors who had gathered nearby couldn't believe their eyes. Whiskers, the cat they had assumed was gone forever, was back. Her fur was dirty and tangled from days of travel, but her presence was undeniable. How had she found her way back? How had she come this far? The neighbors whispered among themselves, not sure what to make of it. With no time to waste, Detective Mills unlocked the door. As she stepped inside, the silence of the house greeted her. The usual hum of life, the sound of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, was missing. It felt cold, as though the house had been waiting, frozen in time. There was no movement, no sign of life. It was a stillness that made her skin prickle. She walked through the room slowly, her footsteps echoing in the emptiness. And then, in the corner of the living room, she spotted it. Whiskers had entered the house. The little cat moved with quiet grace, padding softly through the rooms, her movements purposeful, oh, yet gentle. It was almost as if she were seeking something or someone. Whiskers moved silently through the hallway and into Emily's bedroom. The room was untouched, but something was clearly missing. The warmth, the laughter, the light. Everything was still. The air seemed thick with the absence of life. Whiskers stopped at the edge of the bed, her nose twitching as she sniffed the air. She turned, as if sensing something beyond the ordinary. And then, she lay down next to a pile of Emily's clothes, clothes that had been left in a hurry, as though someone had meant to return, but never did. Whiskers curled up, her body tight with sorrow, and mewed softly, as if calling out to Emily. There was no response, only the silence of the room. But it didn't matter. Whiskers had come home, back to where she had once felt loved and safe. She had come to say goodbye in her own way. The detective stood in the doorway watching the scene unfold. She couldn't help but feel a chill as she observed the little cat, so still and so intent on staying close to the memory of the woman she had once shared this home with. Whiskers had returned to the place she once loved, not just for herself, but for Emily, for the family that had once welcomed her. But now, the house was empty, and Whiskers was alone. Her journey, filled with determination and heartache, had brought her back. But there was no one there to greet her. The neighbors outside couldn't stop talking. They had all seen Whiskers leave so long ago, and now, here she was again, at the doorstep, like a ghost returning home. But the house was no longer full of life. It was cold, quiet, empty. The bond that had once filled the home with warmth was gone. Whiskers, lying by Emily's clothes, let out another soft meow, her mournful cry echoing through the empty house. It was as if she was mourning the loss of not just a home, but of a love that could never be replaced. And in that moment, the weight of the loss became clear to everyone who was witnessing it. The cat, the house, the family. It was all a memory now, frozen in time. Detective Mills stood at the front door, her eyes scanning the scene with quiet curiosity. She had seen her fair share of strange cases, but this one felt different. There, sitting by the door, was Whiskers, the cat who had been missing for so long. The moment the detective walked into the house, she noticed the familiar silence. But Whiskers, with her wide, knowing eyes, was unyielding in her spot. The detective immediately understood. Something significant had brought the cat back. Without wasting a moment, Detective Mills reached out to Lily, who had been in deep mourning since her mother's unexpected passing. The suddenness of the loss, combined with the abandonment of her beloved cat, had left Lily feeling more broken than she ever thought possible. But now, a small glimmer of hope flickered in her heart when she heard the detective's voice on the phone. Lily hurried back to the house, uncertainty gripping her every step. Her heart pounded in anticipation. When she opened the door, the sight of Whiskers there, sitting quietly, yet with an unmistakable sense of calm, took her breath away. In that instant, a sense of peace washed over Lily. She rushed forward and sank to her knees, her tears flowing freely as she reached for her lost companion. Whiskers, with a soft meow, responded to Lily's touch, as if to say, "I'm home now." Lily gently cradled her, feeling the bond between them reignite. She whispered, "We'll start over, just the two of us." The sadness she had carried for so long seemed to fade as she held Whiskers close. The cat had survived, and now she had returned, not only for herself, but to help heal the broken pieces of Lily's heart. Not long after, Alex came to visit. Word had spread about Whiskers' remarkable journey back home, and the story was hard to believe for anyone who hadn't witnessed it. As they sat in the quiet living room, Alex revealed something that made the entire situation even more significant. He shared a secret that had stayed with him all these years. Whiskers was no ordinary cat. She had been rescued as a kitten by Emily's late husband, the same man Lily had lost so many years ago. Whiskers wasn't just a pet. She was a link to their past, a living connection to the love that had once filled their home. Lily's eyes widened as the truth sank in. Whiskers had been there since the very beginning. Through the years, through the loss, and through the hard moments, Whiskers had stayed, silently holding on to the memories of a family that had once been whole. And now, she was here again, bringing them back together, as though she had never left. In the weeks that followed, Lily began to rebuild her life, step by step. With Whiskers by her side, she found the courage to face the world again. The loneliness that had once overwhelmed her was replaced with the quiet comfort of companionship. Together, they forged a new chapter, a chapter that honored Emily's memory, while also creating space for a new beginning. It wasn't easy, but it was healing. And it was exactly what they both needed. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Whiskers sat by the window, watching the fading light. Lily joined her, leaning against the wall. As she gazed at the sky, Whiskers let out a soft meow, almost as if she were speaking to the world beyond. It was in that moment, as Lily looked up at the twilight sky, that she saw it. For just an instant, she thought she saw a faint, glowing figure in the distance, a figure that smiled down at them, calm and serene. Lily blinked, unsure of what she had just seen, but the feeling that washed over her was undeniable. In that brief, silent moment, she understood. Emily's spirit was still with them, watching over her family. The bond between them, between Whiskers and the family, was not broken by death. It was timeless, stretching beyond the limits of the physical world. Final twist. As Lily and Whiskers sat together, the cat's gaze lifted once more to the sky. There, in that fleeting moment, a soft golden glow seemed to echo the smile that Lily had seen before. It was a sign, a reminder that the love shared between them would never truly fade. It would live on, forever connecting them across the boundaries of life and death. Whiskers, the cat who had survived against all odds, had found her way home. Not just physically, but spiritually. She had led Lily back to healing, and to understanding that love never dies. It transcends time, space, and even death itself. And so Whiskers' incredible journey comes full circle. A story of love, loyalty, and the connections that even time and distance can't break. Sometimes, the ones we think we've lost forever find their way back to us, reminding us that love transcends life, loss, and even death. If this story moved you, remember, every moment with our loved ones, whether human or animal, is precious. Cherish them, because you never know when a simple act of kindness or loyalty can change a life or save one. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Until next time, take care, stay kind, and never underestimate the power of unconditional love.